All right, thank you very much, Moshidi. I hope I got that right. And good morning again. I noted that the French wasn't a foremost language when she said ça va. So I'm happy to be here. Thankfully, I'll be doing this in English, so we should all be fine. I'm happy to be here this morning. It was quite a complicated means to get here, but thankfully I'm here. So I'll spend the time that has been allotted sharing with everyone here, and hopefully along the line also learning from you all the journey for us in Ecobank when it comes to financial inclusion. On the theme, digital access, the future of financial inclusion in Africa. Essentially, what I would be talking about is what we understand by financial inclusion, share a few thoughts with you on the data, what the statistics show, I'm sure some of which you are familiar with, but then also go into the experience within Ecobank. But more importantly, what then does the future hold for us? So to set the context, at least for us, there are two terms that often we believe get confused: financial inclusion and financial literacy. So I'll try to share what we understand by that. Literacy, financial literacy, or education, like the word literacy shows, tells us it's the ability to understand how money works and the art of investing, managing that money, and making sound financial decisions. Now, when we look at financial inclusion on the other hand, unlike literacy, it refers to these individuals and businesses having access to those financial solutions or products that we talked about. But these products, inclusion then means it's accessible and affordable and is delivered in a sustainable manner. Now, I believe that this context is important because the two, both the literacy and inclusion, really we can't do one without the other, as I'm sure you appreciate. Without the knowledge, the literacy, financial inclusion really cannot be sustained. We can start the effort, but we need to understand or be literate around it so that the beneficiaries of financial inclusion can own that process. As we go along, we'll share what I find to be some interesting experiences which keep teaching us the lessons on the difference or the relationship between these two. More importantly, for us, particularly in Ecobank, financial inclusion is important for two reasons: because of the impact that it has on society. Now, the Ecobank Group has presence in over 33 countries in Africa. So for us, our impact on the continent is foremost. That really is our strategy. But related to that, being a commercial entity, we believe that financial inclusion must make economic sense or must be profitable. So two things: the social impact, the benefit for everyone, and two, the profitability or economic sense in doing this is the reason why we are keen on this. In 2022, Ecobank Day, which is one day where across the group, all our countries focus on something, giving back to the community. This year has been focused on financial inclusion. We celebrated this just past Saturday, the 12th of November. So we'll share a bit about that. But let's look at the data, okay? In 2018, statistics show that across Africa, just under 90%, about 89% of women are the ones whose jobs were in the informal sector. And this is essentially the group that we believe financial inclusion touches. You would agree with me that, and speaking as a woman, women entrepreneurs face numerous challenges when it comes to resources that are needed for the growth of their businesses, for basic economic activity. Let's look at just two areas. One of them is to do with land. Now, I come from Ghana in West Africa, and I'm sure that the experience is similar across the continent. Just about 13% of us own land, as compared to thrice that number, some 36% of men who own land. Why is that important? Now, for banks like us, any discussion in terms of support often comes along with something being given by the beneficiary of that funding. Anyone who wants to do some investment, some economic activity, needs the land or other property to invest in. So the fact that there is this difference in ownership of land is key for us. Another thing, even in accessing finance itself, there's just around 37% of women involved in or have easy access to finance as compared to close to 50% for men. So having identified this, added to this the fact that the African Development Bank estimates that there is a gap of about $42 billion in credit funding that exists today, most of which should be accessed by women businesses. For these problems, or what this data shows, tells us why, as we go along, I'll share with you what we are doing in terms of focusing on women entrepreneurs. The second thing is on youth. Now, in Africa, I'm sure you've seen the statistic that as at 2021, some 68% of us are not financially literate. Remember what we shared at the beginning, financial literacy versus inclusion, that ability to understand how money works. Many of these are not banked for reasons like that, about 62%, and 40% of them are youth between the ages of 15 and 24. The unbanked have mainly a primary education, some 74% of this. So essentially, with all these numbers, the statistics, the data that I've shared, I think it goes without saying the importance of us working to improve upon financial inclusion and literacy across the continent. I'll share with you what we in Ecobank are doing. But something interesting that happened just on Saturday when we had our Ecobank Day. So the first thing, I mentioned that our focus is on driving that inclusion. And because we recognize that it's linked to literacy, part of that initiative involves educating our women entrepreneurs and the unbanked on what financial knowledge means. So we had a program in Ghana, same as across our countries, invited a number of women involved in 2 industries, sewing, women seamstresses, as we call it there, and others who are traders, petty traders. For us in the bank, we thought that the education, the explaining of our products, our solutions, how we made it easily available to them was key. One interesting comment from a participant was this. After 3 speakers had explained that we have solutions that are simple, you can open an account within minutes. When you need to make savings, bring your money to the bank, or transfer it by mobile money, one participant stood up and said, "No, I will not do this by mobile money. I would want to come over." Now, why did she say so? Because at the end of the day, she's comfortable when she has seen that she has physically brought her small savings to the branch of the bank. Now, I'm sharing this comment because for many of us, the reality of financial inclusion may sometimes differ from what the recipient is looking at. We think about convenience, making it easy. That's digital access. But in some cases, the beneficiaries consider other factors like safety. So our responsibility is to bring the 2 together, make our offer and our interventions as close as possible to the reality of the customer, the beneficiary of those interventions. I'd like to share some of the initiatives from Ecobank for these 2 primary groups, the women and the youth, who from the statistics are the least banked or the least beneficiaries of financial inclusion. So I'll start off with women. Across the Ecobank group, we have a solution for women which is Elevate by Ecobank. What this does is to address any of 4 categories of women entrepreneurs. So a business that has majority leadership, board membership or management being women, a business where management is primarily women, over 50%, where their employees are mainly women, again in the majority, or a business that provides services, products and services for women. So that is Elevate by Ecobank. Any one of these 4 categories qualifies an entrepreneur to benefit from the solutions. How does this relate to financial inclusion? Our offer under this solution covers both financial and non-financial solutions. So I would focus on non-financial, for example. We've spent time over the last 3 years educating women entrepreneurs with various initiatives. A lot of this is done in partnership with entities like the African Union, Global Business Schools Network, and have various webinars and sessions to train our women entrepreneurs on basic skills that they need to acquire. That's equipping of our women entrepreneurs with the literacy on even running their business, how the decisions they take relate to legal and regulatory requirements in the countries where they operate. We believe is empowering them to be better equipped and financially included. A number of these initiatives under Elevate by Ecobank involve repeated engagements, not just a one-off training session as we had in the past. For financial support, we also look at giving preferential rates, easier lending conditions, and so on. By means of this, we think that we are contributing to improving financial inclusion for our women entrepreneurs and helping to reduce the statistics that we shared earlier, or make it better. On the part of youth as well, a number of innovative banking solutions help us to make it easier for any young one, anyone starting business, to have a banking relationship. Across many of our countries, government initiatives are also allowing us to simplify the process of banking the unbanked, and all these help us to contribute to financial inclusion. So the experience has been for us to learn to deliver what is most relevant to the people that we deal with. Learning to speak a language that is local, for example, the partners that we deal with doing the same. Now, before I perhaps take your thoughts as well on what I've shared so far, we would say that looking into the future, we think that the financial inclusion journey is an ongoing one. It's something that will require consistent effort to achieve the progress that we want. We think that it will take more than one day in the year, even for us in Ecobank. It will be through initiatives like what we do with our women and youth, through sharing our experiences, and through learning from our customers, especially as we bring them on board in our dealings with them. I would like to pause here and hear from anyone in the audience if there are thoughts on the subject matter, financial inclusion, improving digital access, and what the experience has been. I'll be happy to share the Ecobank experience as well. Thank you. Are there any thoughts, any contributions or questions for me or on the subject?
Yes. Hello, Charlotte. So the question I have is really about just literacy, because there's financial literacy, there's product literacy, But when it comes to some of the people that you might be trying to reach, or we might be trying to reach, with financial products, do you have any thoughts about how we overcome the challenge of people being able to read, to be able to access products digitally? Thank you.
Thank you, Osaho. I think that's a very important question or comment. Yes, I mentioned that we've learned to use language that is understood. Let me share an example. Okay, one way we do this is by working with the technically trained adult education institutions. So, for example, in some of our countries in West Africa, both government and quasi-government entities are trained to offer civil education, not only for in the financial area. We spend time training those facilitators to understand the solution, to understand the finance terms. After that is done, they then impart the same knowledge to the beneficiaries. Particularly, and we treat this usually as associations or groups of people who we want to bring into the banking sector. So an example is that when we speak to the typical, perhaps women entrepreneur and say that it's important for you to do financial planning, or even the word budgeting. I don't know about you, but in the local language in many of our countries, explaining the word budgeting alone is not as simple. So it's been through learning to break down what finance means to us, what a product, what it means when we say savings, etc. And it often involves working with partner institutions who have the skill set to train, especially adult learners or adult beneficiaries with this. Any other thoughts? Has the experience been the same for you, where you are? It's very quiet. It's said that when it's this quiet, either you didn't communicate or it was too long. So I'm hoping it's not the latter. Yes,
Hey,
sir.
Charlotte.
Hi.
Do you work much with the non-profits to aid with the increasing of financial awareness and education? The likes of African Lender, for example, Digital Frontiers. Are those the type of organisations you work with as well to try and sort of improve that situation?
I'm sorry, I missed. You asked whether we work with Digital Frontiers.
Do you work with any non-profits, third parties, to help to accelerate that financial literacy element? So training, for example, across your respective 33 countries, or is it really a sort of something that Ecobank do unilaterally in terms of the training and the improvement of the awareness of how to be more financially
Fantastic.
Aware?
Okay. I understand. We don't do this unilaterally. We do it with a number of entities, some non-profit and some profit-oriented. So I'll give you a few examples. For the recent Ecobank Day, for example, it was led by our Ecobank Foundation and in partnership with UN Women to offer the financial inclusion across. For our initiatives for women entrepreneurs in particular, Elevate by Ecobank, we have done a number of capacity building using external parties. It's often at a cost to the bank, but not to the customer. So the AUDA, African Union on Development, for example, we ran a 15-module MSME training for both customers of Ecobank and non-customers, even those who were not customers, but within the SME bucket that we wanted to impart the knowledge to. We have done some with different business schools. So the Global Business Schools Network, that came at a cost share between the bank, 40% for the SME and 60% borne by us. So these are just examples, and this is across all our countries. We select participants from across the continent in order to share these interventions.
Thanks.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
From a Southern African perspective, I'm not so sure if you know what we call stokvels. Stokvels, which is a group of women that sort of come together for saving purposes. I'm just not so sure from a Ghanaian point of view. Do you have those kind of, how do you treat that and how do you digitize around that?
I struggle to hear. I suspect there's an echo. But did you say stock fair?
Yeah, stokvels, which basically is a group of maybe people, mostly women. They normally come together for saving purposes, for whatever reason. I believe that's one part of financial inclusion. I just wanted to know from Ecobank's perspective, how have you managed that and how have you digitized around that?
Right, okay. So from what I got, I think that in some parts it's referred to as SUSU, or yes, savings associations or cooperatives.
Yes.
Is that right? Fantastic. So in the local, the most dominant language where I am, it's a SUSU union. Okay, SUSU in local language meaning savings, like small savings. So SUSU. Yes, we do have those. A lot of the interventions are done at association or group level. That is from the Ecobank perspective. Because as I'm sure you will agree with me on, it's difficult to reach these unbanked or financially illiterate, as it were, groupings in their individual capacities. So we deal with the associations, get the membership, the duly noted membership as determined, and then our interventions are done to them. I must add that even for staff within the bank, there are situations where we do volunteer and train both the youth at universities, at secondary schools, and then to groups like you talk about. The last comment I would make in terms of how we even support their own savings activities as well are that in our various markets, there are simple savings tools that we deploy to them. Some of these are based on the QR platform. We have our Ecobank Pay. In countries where there is the universal quick response code solution, that facilitates collection of the savings by the members on a regular basis, and some in partnership with the telcos for mobile money-led solutions. So in these ways, that's how we deal with them. Thanks.
Thank you. From your presentation, you focusing mainly on women. I just want to check if there is anything that you have done around the youth and probably the elderly from a financial inclusion perspective.
Thank you, sir. So the youth and the elderly, was that the second part? Okay. I would say that for the youth, yes. Currently, we have youth-focused products, digital solutions and non-digital, I mean the traditional. There are examples around how they even establish accounts with the bank and making this as simple as possible. We have across our countries, within our consumer banking function, a dedicated youth banking team, and that is what that team does. Essentially, at the time when these youth are in tertiary or vocational institutions, that's when we approach them and work with them. For the elderly, we currently do not have elderly focused only. We don't. We have for youth. However, the simplicity of dealing with Ecobank is opened up to all our customer buckets. You know, but that's a good thought which we could explore, what it is that we could do with the elderly as well, who are vulnerable. Thank you very much.
My other question is, in our minds, we always view this financial inclusion as we can probably design a product and then market that product. Then we will probably see the numbers. But from your presentation, it appears that it requires specialized focus and quite a lot of resources. From a strategic point of view, what would be your advice to banks on how they can get into that market from a financial inclusion perspective? Other than it being design a product, market it, you will see the numbers.
Okay, thank you. I think you've indirectly answered the question. It requires a deliberate focus as a strategy. The fact is that in the short term, primarily, a lot of the interventions targeted at the beneficiaries or the unbanked for financial inclusion will not immediately show a clear profit return. So for a commercial bank, if it's not a focus right from the highest levels of strategic planning for the institution, the focus will not be there. Now, the advantage, however, is that our experience has been with the focus at the group. In our case, for example, where there's a group setup and the same planning or strategy is deployed across all our markets, the adequate resources and budget allocation is done, the follow-through in terms of the teams to drive delivery, and then along the line, a review of the impact as to whether it's achieving the impact that we want is also done. So that direct high-level strategic focus needs to be in place. The other comment I'll make is that over time, the ability to review and then change strategy or adapt it as we learn is also important. So for commercial banks, where traditionally we've looked at the clear return initiatives, as we've changed and we want to transform our continent, the focus on financial inclusion, we really can't avoid it, but we need to be consistent and then tweak or adapt as we go along, as we learn. Yes. Thank you. Okay. I don't see other hands up. I think that there's been quite a number of comments from my right. I thank you very much for the feedback. And for everyone, I'll just say that it's a journey that we are on. It's good that we are talking about it even more now. And for us in Ecobank, we will continue to do our part by focusing on the interventions that we can make to improve on financial inclusion across the continent. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.